Hello again. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at some dynamic poses that we could use for our characters. Poses with plenty of strength and power. This is what we want for our hero. So when we draw her, we want her to have a good, strong pose. We're not looking for a pose with too much movement, but something that, although it's more static, still has the movement and the flow of a hero. So here I have 3 women in quite strong poses. Although the pose is considered to be more static because they're not jumping, they're not running, seen in perspective, they are still a little dynamic. So this type of pose conveys a feeling of power. It has more impact. What I'm going to do is draw the action lines so you can see the contrast between the 2 boxes, the torso and the pelvis, and how the lines of the shoulders and the hips work. In the first pose, the line of the shoulders highlights an ascending direction and the hip line descends the other way, and this gives us what's known as a contrapposto. This is the contrast between those 2 main lines that gives us that more dynamic pose. As you see, the line in the middle I've drawn for the direction is curved. The head is looking in the opposite direction. So again, the pose is quite dynamic, although it looks more static. And whenever we have this contrast of elements, we get that movement, that dynamic pose. In the same way, the shoulders and the elbows are going to be in opposite positions. The arm on the right isn't the same as the one on the left. They're in different positions. One hand is facing upwards, the other is facing downwards. We see a similar thing in the next woman, but subtler. The line of the shoulders is slightly more static, more straight, and the hip line is a bit more inclined. So we do have that contrapposto, but as I said, it's subtler than the previous woman. It's also as if she's walking forwards. One arm is closer to the body and the other is a little more separated. Although they're going more or less in the same direction, it still works. The legs are also in a kind of counter position. One is walking forwards and the other is back. One is slightly curved and the other is straight. Although still keeping that balance that goes from the neck to the ankles. Okay, so we have there the hip and the torso lines so you can see how the pose works, but the structure is pretty much there. For the third pose, it's the same again, but she's slightly curved inwards. So you need to see how the line of the shoulders and the hips are again in that contrapposto. The line on the inside, the action line, is like this, because our woman is inclined that way. This is important because it's not the same if the middle line is on the outside or the inside. This can completely change the pose. The head is against the position of the rest of the body. If the body goes one way and the head another, this is another way of creating a dynamic pose. Let's focus a bit more on the balance. So a pose can be balanced. The line that goes from the neck to the legs needs to coincide with the center of these, or at least one of the ankles. In this case, our position would be balanced, and it looks the same as the photo. If you drew a vertical line between the neck and the ankles, you'd see that they'd coincide. So with that, our 3 poses are done. Now you have a reference for your heroic poses. When we draw our heroine, we'll use these as a guide to achieve dynamic, strong, and powerful poses, but without exaggerating. So I hope you found this lesson useful, and in the next lesson, we'll draw some more poses, but this time without a reference. I'll see you there.